The G7, short for the Group of Seven, is an important international organization made up of 7 powerful countries. These countries come together to talk about important global issues and try to find solutions. But what really brought about the creation of this group? Well, join us as we look into the history of the G7 and what it stands for today. With that said, let's get started. The aftermath of World War II. The end of World War II in 1945 marked a moment of profound global reckoning. The devastating consequences of the conflict were felt on an unprecedented scale, leaving the world in a state of disarray, both physically and economically. The war had exacted a heavy toll, causing widespread destruction of infrastructure, cities, and economies in Europe, Asia, and beyond. The human cost was staggering, with millions of lives lost and countless individuals left injured or displaced. The need for rebuilding and restoring order in the aftermath of such catastrophic destruction became an urgent and overriding priority. Nations found themselves facing the monumental task of reconstructing their societies, economies, and political structures from the ruins of war. This entailed not only physical reconstruction, but also the daunting challenge of restoring hope, stability, and prosperity to war-weary populations. In the wake of World War II, the world was acutely aware that the war's destruction and suffering could not be allowed to recur. The unprecedented scale of devastation underscored the necessity for nations to set aside historical grievances and engage in extensive cooperation on both economic and political fronts. International cooperation became an imperative born out of the shared recognition that working together was not merely a choice, but a fundamental requirement for global stability and progress. The imperative for international cooperation was driven by the desire to prevent future crises and conflicts. The lessons learned from the 2 world wars emphasized the interconnectedness of nations and the consequences of isolationism and protectionism. Ensuring global stability and peace became a common objective that transcended national boundaries. In this post-war landscape, institutions and agreements were forged to promote cooperation, trade, and diplomacy. The United Nations, established in 1945, was a pivotal development aimed at fostering dialogue and peaceful resolution of conflicts. Additionally, economic cooperation and recovery efforts, such as those stemming from the Bretton Woods Conference, sought to create a framework for international financial stability and growth. The post-World War II context, characterized by devastation and the recognition of the imperative for international cooperation, set the stage for significant global initiatives and the formation of institutions that continue to shape the world order today. The Bretton Woods Conference. The Bretton Woods Conference, convened in 1944, emerged as a pivotal event in the post-World War II landscape, signifying an earnest endeavor to rebuild the world in the aftermath of the devastating conflict. This gathering brought together representatives from 44 allied nations who congregated in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, USA, with the shared objective of designing a new international monetary system to replace the chaotic economic conditions that had prevailed during the Great Depression and the war. At its core, the Bretton Woods Conference was a response to the pressing need for global financial stability and cooperation. In the midst of the war's destruction, the international community recognized that the existing economic order, characterized by competitive currency devaluations and protectionist trade policies, had exacerbated the Great Depression and contributed to the outbreak of the war itself. During the conference, several landmark agreements were reached, each aimed at reshaping the global economic landscape and fostering recovery in the post-war era. One of the central outcomes of Bretton Woods was the establishment of the International Monetary Fund, or IMF. The IMF was conceived as an international organization tasked with promoting exchange rate stability and facilitating the orderly adjustment of currencies. Member nations would contribute funds to the IMF, creating a pool of resources that could be used to assist countries facing balance of payments problems. This mechanism was designed to prevent the competitive devaluations that had plagued the interwar years. The conference also gave birth to the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, commonly known as the World Bank. Its primary purpose was to provide financial support for the reconstruction and development of war-torn and underdeveloped countries. By offering long-term loans and financial assistance, the World Bank aimed to promote economic recovery and reduce poverty on a global scale. These institutions, the IMF and the World Bank, represented a shift toward international economic cooperation and stability. They were founded on the principles of multilateralism and collaboration, with the goal of preventing the economic nationalism and competitive devaluations that had characterized the pre-war years. The Bretton Woods agreements laid the foundation for a new world economic order, one that prioritized stability, growth, and cooperation over the beggar-thy-neighbor policies of the past. The emergence of the G6. The genesis of the G6, a precursor to the influential G7, can be traced back to the mid-1970s, when the world was grappling with evolving economic dynamics and seeking mechanisms for enhanced international collaboration. This transitional period witnessed the establishment of the G6, a group initially composed of 6 major industrialized nations, each with distinct objectives and motivations. The G6, formed in 1975, included the following initial participating countries: the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, and Japan. These nations came together in response to the changing global economic landscape and shared concerns about economic stability, inflation, exchange rates, and trade imbalances. Their core objective during these early meetings was to deliberate on strategies to address these pressing economic challenges and foster cooperation among their economies. Evolution into the G7. The following year, in 1976, the G6 underwent a significant transformation, evolving into the G7, with the inclusion of Canada as the 7th member. This expansion marked a crucial turning point in the group's evolution and represented a response to the growing recognition of Canada's economic significance and the desire for a more inclusive forum. The inclusion of Canada was driven by several factors, including its robust economy, strong trade ties with G6 nations, and a desire among existing members to broaden the group's representation. Canada's entry not only symbolized the group's willingness to incorporate new voices, but also reflected the increasing interdependence of the global economy. Primary objectives of the G7. One of the central goals of the G7 was to foster economic cooperation among its member nations. In the aftermath of the oil crisis of the 1970s, and amid growing concerns about inflation, exchange rates, and trade imbalances, member nations recognized the imperative of coordinating their economic policies. By working together, they aimed to create a harmonious economic environment that would benefit not only their own economies, but also the global economic system as a whole. The G7 acknowledged the interconnectedness of the global economy and the pivotal role its member nations played in maintaining stability. The group sought to ensure global economic stability by addressing issues such as currency fluctuations and trade imbalances. By engaging in open and candid discussions, G7 leaders aimed to prevent financial crises that could have far-reaching consequences beyond their own borders. They recognized that economic instability in one member nation could have a domino effect on others, underscoring the necessity of collective action. Also, sustainable economic growth was a fundamental objective of the G7. Member nations recognized that sustained economic prosperity required not only short-term measures, but also long-term planning and cooperation. They aimed to create conditions conducive to sustainable growth, which would benefit their citizens and contribute to global economic well-being. This included addressing issues like fiscal policies, monetary stability, and structural reforms. Furthermore, the G7 understood the importance of proactive measures to prevent financial crises. By sharing insights, data, and expertise, member nations could identify potential risks and take preemptive action to mitigate them. This approach was particularly critical in an era marked by economic volatility and uncertainty. The G7 served as a unique forum for leaders to engage in candid and open discussions. It provided a platform where leaders could share their perspectives, exchange ideas, and collaborate on policies. Early achievements. During its early years, the G7 achieved several notable accomplishments in the realm of global economics and finance. The group provided a platform for leaders to coordinate efforts to combat inflation, stabilize exchange rates, and address trade imbalances. It played a pivotal role in shaping international economic policy and setting the stage for coordinated action on pressing issues. One significant example of the G7's early achievements was its response to the global energy crisis of the 1970s. Member nations worked together to develop strategies to mitigate the impact of rising energy prices and ensure stable energy supplies. The formation of the G7, following the emergence of the G6, was a response to the evolving economic landscape of the 1970s. It represented a crucial step in the development of a forum for global economic cooperation, with a primary focus on promoting stability, addressing economic challenges, and preventing crises. Today, the G7 continues to play a pivotal role in shaping global economic and political relations. Its enduring impact on international cooperation and stability remains evident as it grapples with contemporary challenges while building on its rich history of collaboration and achievement. And there you have it, guys. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to stay tuned for more amazing content. Thank you for joining us, and see you next time.